Hi, welcome to another episode of Expert Experts. Today we've got Saria Moran. She's the founder of the Liberated Woman. She's a coaching and training provider, and she's dedicated to empowering women, especially those who need to recover and thrive after domestic abuse or domestic violence. So she's also a certified life, divorce and domestic abuse recovery coach. So she's got a lot of titles, which today we will discuss with her. She's got a very unique approach, and she runs training sessions, which we've been involved with as well, which we think are fantastic, where she makes sure that these women, and this will be offered to men as well at some point, have a safe, non-judgmental space to rebuild and achieve a transformation if they have gone through something. She also partners with lots of organisations with domestic abuse awareness in the UAE mainly, but also outside, and looking at also policies, and wants to offer real support to the employees of these organisations to make sure that they're aware of these challenges. So Saria, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
We're really impressed by kind of what you do. There's not many doing this, especially, I mean, there's lots of life and divorce coaches, which is great, but not everybody really has that focus on domestic abuse like you do and what you've kind of started in this whole concept. So my first question is, obviously you went through something yourself, and I know this is not on the list, and obviously
That's
that kind of
okay.
triggered you to think, well, I want to set something up similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my experience was a long time ago. It was over 20 years ago. And it took me probably 20 years to really recognise that what I had suffered from was abuse. I think for many years I was in denial. And once I come out, I used to work in corporate for many years. So I worked in corporate safety, security and health. And when I came out of the corporate world, I actually had that time to stop and to think. And I knew that I wanted to do coaching, but I wasn't quite sure in what space. Life coaching is great, it's wonderful, it really helps people transform their lives, but I really wanted to do something where I felt I would actually be making a difference, and I would be waking up with some purpose. So I started the Liberated Woman, and I feel it's particularly important to showcase and talk about DV because people just don't want to, and that's the challenge with it. I didn't want to talk about it. I really didn't want to talk about it. I had to face up to my experiences and my fears as I was kind of going through the retraining to understand the trauma that I had suffered. And I really want to be a voice for other women so that they know they're not on their own.
And they can open up.
Because there's just this huge misconception that it only happens to certain types of women, and it's completely false. The women that join the Liberated Woman that come onto the programme, we have doctors, we have lawyers, we have women who are CFOs, chief medical scientists.
It's not just all women that, for example, don't have financial independence.
Exactly. And I think, and they come on and they're like, oh wow, so I'm not the only one. I'm a successful woman and I've suffered from abuse. Yes, you have. And I think that was something I had to also kind of get my head around as well, because I was so ashamed in talking about what I'd experienced, and people would often say to me, you suffered from domestic, you just don't seem like the type. And I'm like, what does that even mean?
There's a lot of,
So the reason for me really starting this was because I want women to feel as though they've got a safe space to land. And I think the challenge when you're living as an expat in the UAE is you don't have your family. You probably don't. You might have friends, but friends come and go.
And they're different types of friends, exactly.
And it's so transactional here, you know, because people will come, they might stay for a few years. You've built those relationships, you've got friends, and then they leave. And you feel like you're, you know, forever friend dating and starting all over again. So the purpose of the programme is really for women to come to feel as though they've got that safe space. They can openly talk about what it is they're experiencing without being judged. Because you're already carrying so much guilt and shame already that you want to be able to release and let it go. And I think the other thing I would say is my parents divorced when I was very young, when I was 8, and it was, the divorce itself wasn't challenging for them, it was the aftermath of the divorce. It was the egos getting in the way.
So you remember that?
Who's having who at Christmas, you can't do X, Y, and Z. Can I take the kids on holiday? No, you can't. And that was awful. From a young age, it was awful. So I'm really passionate about, when I support clients, making sure they can shine an unconscious light on their egos, because often they're making decisions about the kids that is not in the best interests of the children.
No, of course.
We see that.
Of that.
We see that all the time,
and
it's
it is, a lot of it is ego. It's hard.
No, of course.
Yeah.
So, in terms of your work then and what you do in the UAE, in your view, what's the sort of influence and the impact of the cultural context that you're dealing with here in terms of the survivors that have support from you here?
Yeah, I think it's there's really kind of two types of clients I would deal with. So you've got the expats who don't know where to start. They haven't got a clue. Perhaps don't even know if what they're suffering from is abuse. So they have a very different journey than I would say perhaps locals here, who would be dealing more with honour, shame on the family. You can do anything you want. We know it's abuse. We know you're suffering from abuse, but you can't get divorced.
Yeah, exactly. That happens a lot.
But don't get divorced. And I tend to work a lot more perhaps with the expats who are struggling to understand how to navigate the process here. Where do I find a good lawyer? Where do I find someone that actually understands domestic violence? Because I've spoken with 3 lawyers and they have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, let's try and signpost you to people that, you know, are going to hold you in a safe and sacred space.
Of course.
Or, you know, what charities are available, what support can I get? So I think it's such a melting pot of cultures here.
So that brings on to the next question, doesn't it? So resources in Saria and support systems for survivors in Dubai, for example, or the UAE, how can they access these services? Are they kind of, they look online and it's there? Would they call the police? Would they contact you? Like, what do you think, what's the first thing people do here? Or they don't do anything? Like, what happens? So is it police they call?
They can, absolutely. I would say if they haven't spoken to anybody yet, if there is somebody that they feel really safe with, like a friend, at least let them know. Because you're so often in your head, you don't verbalise anything. Sometimes you just need to physically say it out loud. So if there's a friend or someone you can talk to, speak to them. The police are active here. You can report domestic violence. You can do it through the app. You can call them. There's the Dubai Foundation for Women and Children. They're available as a charity. There is support here.
Because I was on the radio yesterday, one of the questions, and that's what I'm asking, was it was a neighbour, and he was asking that he thinks his neighbour's being abused, and he said, I'm scared, like, shall I call the police? Who shall I call to anonymously kind of tip them off? Will I be causing more damage? Will the neighbour find out? You're like, it's quite hard. And then I think Helen mentioned something online, 1 or 2 organisations that you can call, but I'm not sure if you know.
So it would be the Dubai Foundation, also Shamsaha. There you can download their app. They do so much work in this space. They're very helpful. And I would say when you have callers like that or people, they generally don't know what to do. They don't want to get involved.
If you hear someone being abused, what do you? It's hard.
Because they're worried about the repercussions. And often they'll, even for somebody that's going through it, the times that people would say to me, I'm going to call the police, and I would say, whatever you do, don't call the police, because you're going to put me in more danger.
The implications of that, I suppose, could be more far-reaching than the person trying to help may realise. So, that's really important.
But I think when there is violence, you know, we would naturally want to get the police involved because we don't know what could happen. It's really, really, it can feel really, really tricky.
It probably feels scarier here in a foreign country, because you think, what if they misunderstand what I'm trying to say, what's happened, and they take some serious action. And I just wanted to tell, it's different. It is
hard. I saw a woman who was attacked by her husband here a few years ago, and it was in a public setting, and people didn't know what to do. So somebody went and called the security guard, and the security guard came over. Luckily, we live here. There's security everywhere. We can call on the security as well. There's cameras. But even as a bystander, you know, in that scenario, you think, I'm not going to get involved. Even doing something like going up to them and saying, can you just tell me where the nearest Starbucks is? just disrupts what's happening.
Mhm.
Now they might respond and say, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
We're at the nearest stop. Can you not see I'm having an argument? But you're causing a disruption, and that can also be quite helpful. But there is support here. It's just people feeling as though they've got the confidence to do it, and that there's not going to be any retaliation.
It's really good to see that the UAE recently, I wrote 1 or 2 articles about the new domestic violence laws, how they're taking it a lot more. I won't say they never took it seriously, but how they've put more measures in place and just adjusted the laws, and it's really good because I think at least there's more protection. There is a victim as well if something happens.
There is.
So that's great. So what do you think of the new laws?
Yeah, and I think people that they are taking it seriously. You have to remember Dubai is still relatively new.
Yeah, it's still new. Yeah. So they're obviously evolving as well.
Exactly. So there's going to be changes in legislation, and this is no different from the UK, for example.
Yeah.
There's laws in place there that are being governed, that are constantly being amended and changed and updated to improve the support for women and men. So there's always more that can be done in that space in terms of the regulatory field. And I think one of the things that people struggle a lot with here is if it's not physical, they really struggle in trying to prove the emotional. And the Dubai Foundation, they published some statistics, I think last year, that showed the majority of people that were coming were reporting emotional abuse. And emotional abuse can feel very hard to try to prove and explain to people, because when you've been isolated for so long, you don't speak to anybody, you're not with your friends or family because the perpetrator has, purposely isolated you. It can be very hard to prove, but it's real, and you're living it day to day, and that becomes your world.
I was just going to ask, what are the sort of signs or indications that someone could look out for, a friend or a family member, in terms of someone who may be sort of experiencing domestic abuse? I know obviously you've just touched on emotional abuse can be difficult if they're isolated, but putting that to one side, what sort of things could someone perhaps notice?
Yeah, I guess there's the obvious one in terms of physical. I mean, physical is always kind of easier to notice.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, they might hide their bruises through makeup or make excuses, very common, or no, I fell down the stairs, my toddler was grabbing me. So they're kind of the more obvious ones. Financial is a huge one.
Yes.
Financial abuse is huge.
Yeah.
And men go through it as well.
They massively go through it. I have male private clients that I'm working with who are suffering massively from financial abuse, where they're being controlled by their partners.
More and more of our clients telling us.
And I think small things like, and I'm not talking about, for example, we talk about from a men's perspective, I'm not talking about a woman that is just spending too much and the husband is saying, probably crack down a bit on the spending. I mean, you're being asked for receipts when you go out for a coffee. You don't have access to savings accounts. You don't have access to bank accounts. You're physically disabled in terms of...
Or, for example, we see her name's on the mortgage, but she has no clue about anything. And she's like, oh, apparently he sold the last house and the money's sat in his dad's bank, apparently, and I don't even know what's going on with this mortgage, but my name's on it. It's like, hang on, how do you not know?
It's really common though. It's so common that people are sort of kept in the dark within their own financial life, really, when they're in relationships and marriages. They're not sure.
And when you're doing, Saria, your sessions at the Liberated Woman, and you get different speakers, you get different, I mean, I don't know too much about it, you can share that, but when you've got these sessions, are you looking at dealing with recovery and support and finding out what each one wants, or do you pick kind of what areas you think they need to work on, like, for example, financial guidance and independence, like how they can move on from this relationship and change things about how they think or how they were in that relationship and how they can move forward? What kind of
how do I structure it?
What kind of therapy or support are you offering?
So I really spent time thinking about, I know it sounds awful,
it's like
but
a program,
the journey.
isn't it?
What journey you're on, what do you need? And I kind of went back to what I felt I needed at the time and mapped that out kind of from end to end. So I take a little bit from, there's a program in the UK called the Freedom Program.
Oh, yeah.
It's been running for years by a fantastic woman called Pat Craven, and she used to work in the prison services for many years, and she identified through her time with perpetrators that they were all, there were similar personality traits, behaviours, patterns of behaviour, and she created the program which focuses on what we call the dominator, and the dominator wears multiple masks, and we talk through those different masks to help the women on the program identify what it is they've been experiencing. And then they all, honestly, the women that come on, they all say, my word, it's like you're talking about my ex-husband.
Yeah, it's
like
bizarre.
it can't be the same person. Surely this is not the same person in multiple
Each
places.
one has gone,
but they've all gone through, they all identify and
must
see.
give you goosebumps as well, like.
Yeah, I mean, you have
Oh
moments
my
of,
God.
yes, this is awful, but
everyone's experiencing it.
yeah, and when
Yeah.
you hear the stories, but the stories also become really empowering, because once they hear that she's also suffered from that as well.
Yeah, of course.
That makes sense.
Yeah, cool.
So I do a lot of that, but also I bring in financial advisors. So we've had some financial fitness sessions, because that's a huge thing. And as you say, because you see it all the time, I often think it's very, it's easy to judge when you're not in it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I often think we need to empower women when it comes to money.
And to be more have
Savvy.
more knowledge,
Just
just
the
to be like,
confidence to ask questions and say, actually, what is that?
I think you get I think with women, sometimes you get two extremes. You get someone who's quite very savvy, like you said, and knows everything, and no one can mess her about, and she's very much in charge of everything. And then you get, the man who's just literally like, oh, well, so my wife takes care of it.
Yeah.
And then you get the opposite, where she's just like, oh, I just let him take care of it, because that's just easier for her. But then obviously when it comes to divorce or separation, or she just wants to get out of the marriage, it's not that easy, because she doesn't even have a clue.
No.
And it makes it even harder for us.
Yes,
Because
it's very true.
we can only find out so much as well.
Yeah.
So I get women saying, oh, I know he's got lots of properties and businesses with his family, but what are they called? Where are they?
Yes.
We can't just kind of go to a court and say, well, he's got all of this without any evidence of it.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
I know. And that's one of the things when I work with my private clients, I'll say, you have to find out, you have to excavate, you need to learn what there is.
More,
because sometimes it feels a bit dangerous. I'm like, you've just kind of
accepted, like, oh, he pays the bills, he pays for everything, the schooling, and I don't really know what his salary package is. I know he gets a big bonus every year. You get that kind of talk, but and he just gives me a credit card, and I just spend on it, and he covers it. But then as soon as something goes wrong, the credit card's stopped.
Yeah.
And then she's, potentially it's scary.
And it's really hard for them once they're post-divorce, is now they're managing finances on their own.
And then it's like a visa situation as well, because she's on his visa. She's also worried that she might get kind of kicked off it.
Of course,
and that's another thing we get asked a lot as well. What do I do if I'm divorced? Can I stay because my kids are here?
Yeah,
So
and they want to rebuild here, right? So we have financial fitness, and then I'll bring in healers. So we'll have healers to come in and do some session to help clear some of the trauma. Lawyers, family lawyers to come on and support, answer any questions, because a majority of the time they cannot afford legal services, and they have to represent themselves. And normally what I see is the guy has a great big fancy lawyer, and she's trying to do it through the court by herself.
I know, it's very hard.
Which is really challenging. So it's great that we have family lawyers to come and support. And also human resources representatives to come in to help with, okay, you haven't worked for 25 years, what next?
So like kind of recruitment.
So we can kind of do a skills assessment with them, help them build their online profile, develop a CV.
Really good proactive steps.
Because it's hard. Maybe they want to set up a business.
It's kind of an all-inclusive, like, to rebuild and reform.
Basically.
And
I'm thinking about how to change that all the time. So how can we improve it? How can I make it
when
better?
When you worked with these HR companies, Saria, as well, what can these employers do to support employees suffering from domestic abuse?
I mean, there's so much they can do.
Is it not?
And it's just not really, it's not really tapped into here. The UK is wonderful. They do some really great work with employers.
What kind of things does the UK do then?
So there's a fantastic initiative called the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse in the UK, an organisation, and they have been working recently with like Vodafone, Vodafone have done mass research into how to support employees suffering from domestic abuse. Because remember, we're talking about it's 1 in 3 women.
Yeah.
1 in 3 women are going to suffer. It's 1 in 7 men. That stat is probably a bit skew-whiffed because men don't talk about it as much.
But
So
I think it's definitely happening because it's so strange. I had a call last night. He said my dad's remarried. He's in his 70s, married a 40-something-year-old. My mum passed away, and she accused him of domestic abuse. And my dad actually said whatever she's been saying that she's been doing, she's actually been doing it to me.
right.
I'm a victim.
Mirroring.
And it's so sad that he's an old man.
Oh.
So she was like, so my dad's been being abused by this woman. She's been
Yeah.
hitting him and throwing things at him, and he just stayed quiet.
And it happens.
Yeah.
It really does happen.
It's very sad.
So I think for men that stat is probably a bit way off because men are starting to report more now. I don't know if you saw did you see the Baby Reindeer on Netflix?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
God.
So you know when that aired,
That's good.
I mean it's I mean
I think I started watching it after so many episodes.
Yeah,
The-
it
I
did
mean,
get a bit intense.
the stalking
Yeah.
is
And then he was
real.
like, it was just like, well, you should have. It was kind of scary because she should have reported it. They was trying to say beforehand.
Yeah, I mean
They
it's
just didn't realise,
it's
yeah.
real, but I mean I think some of the charities in the UK after that was aired said they saw like a 30% increase in men calling in
Yeah.
and saying I've suffered from something similar.
Oh, God.
So it's very much happening to men.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't answer your question. What did you ask me?
No, it was that, wasn't it?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah,
Did
you
I
said what the
answer?
employers do.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
can employers do? Okay. So employers, I think that the cheapest thing and the fastest thing they could do is get something on your intranet where you signpost people to services wherever you might be.
That's it.
It's
yeah.
cheap, it's fast, it's easy.
It might be you then. I mean, it's obviously how much time you've got, but then speaking to these organisations and make awareness. But it's,
It
just, it's
is.
you're one person though as well. So how much can you cover? And the UAE is a big region.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
There has
and
to
I
be
think
like a government-led initiative.
absolutely,
Yeah, definitely.
there needs to be something
And that's what Alex was
pushed.
going to ask you next
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of, we've just obviously touched on perhaps some initiatives, and I know that you mentioned that, say, for example, if you were witnessing domestic abuse, a really easy thing you could do is maybe sort of approach them and interrupt whatever might be happening. Are there any other sort of preventative measures, any steps that either an individual could take in sort of a smaller circumstance or wider sort of community type initiatives that you've either seen that work or that might be helpful for sort of identifying and dealing with this sort of abuse?
I think here it's really about that you don't want to take on anything too much if you're not equipped to deal
Of
with
course.
it, because it can be quite harrowing.
Yeah.
Especially when you're seeing someone that you love going through something, and they'll typically reject you anyway because they are safeguarding the perpetrator.
Sure.
So I would say more than anything, signpost them. Give and offer a safe space.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people understand sometimes how powerful it is when someone just offers you a safe space to talk without interruptions. You know, practicing active listening. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to listen.
Yeah.
Like, that is so powerful.
Yeah.
And you'll find at the end of it, they'll be like, that was so helpful.
Feel a
And you'll
bit
probably
better.
think, I did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do anything.
Just listened.
But I just listened and
And
I
that's what
offered you a
people
safe
need.
space. And I think especially for professionals as well.
Well, that was the next question was like,
Yeah.
what could we do when we're working with people that have gone through it
Yeah.
to make sure that we're giving an effective and compassionate support as well? Is it the same, just giving them that
Safe space, no judgment.
Yeah.
Because you might be the first person they've told.
Yeah.
They may have not told anybody, and they still might not know that what they're suffering from is abuse.
it's really
They might be
sad.
processing it as they're
Yeah.
discussing
No, I
it
think
with
a lot
you.
of them don't even realise.
Yeah,
so
it's
they're
true.
like, I need to get out of this, I've had enough.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, especially with, I mean, the men not as much, but for example, there's one male client that we know, and you know, he hasn't even told us, but then the person that recommended him mentioned that he's being abused. I was like, oh, he didn't actually share that with us, so he must not want to share that with us. So men still hold back. With women, automatically you speak to them, a lot of them start crying.
Yeah.
Like, I've had enough, like, he's doing this, he's done that, there's a whole list of things. And like, now this is my breaking point. So they were like, I want a divorce. There's always women that file first.
Yeah.
And men kind of respond and deal with the kids and the financials.
Yeah.
So that's how it works with us, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, you know, just that space and non-judgmental is so important, because I've had so many clients here where they've come to me and they've said, oh, the lawyer told me that I need to stop being a princess.
Oh, God.
Oh,
or actually, you know, some women deserve what they experience because they're not standing strong enough for themselves.
No.
That's not helpful.
And then you instantly, there's no trust, right?
Yeah.
And then they'll come to me and they'll go, oh, but I think maybe she's right. And I'm like, no. That's not right.
No.
That's not safe.
Yeah.
And that's not, exactly. And that's really sad as well.
Yeah, that is
And
sad.
you know, and
Yeah.
I think, you know, we have to challenge ourselves as women. We have a lot of preconceived ideas as well, I think, at times, and it is very easy to judge people. We all judge, all of us do it without even knowing.
Yeah.
And I think just offering that safe, non-judgmental space for them will do a mass amount. And I think for lawyers as well, even if you have something on your website that points to, if you're suffering from these signs, go here.
Yeah.
But I've noticed in the UK a lot is when you go to, for example, toilets, public toilets, they have lots of posters.
Yeah.
Now signpostings, like, are you suffering this? Have you gone on this? Even like, you know, not even just domestic abuse, anything like forced marriages. Like, you need to call this number. So I think that's really helpful.
Massively.
Just having those posters everywhere as
Easily
well.
accessible.
Massively.
information.
GPs, you know, all these kind of buildings. You go in libraries, like you're like, hang on, maybe a mum might see that, or you know, anyone might see that and say, actually, I could call this place. I don't have to say who I am, but even that might just guide them a little bit and give them some, you know, it's like bullying, for example. If someone's going through it, like, who can you talk to without being scared of repercussions?
Yeah.
Because some people sometimes just want to say it, but once they've said it, it gives them the strength to kind of carry on with that. And once they know they've been heard.
And you wouldn't believe the power in them just saying it.
Yes.
Like,
because they've never said it.
wow.
Yeah.
And if they say it out loud as well, it kind of like that light comes on.
No.
But I think there is so much that, you know, that can be done here in this space, and I think.
And I bet you want to do so much more as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's I love running the group. It's fantastic. The women are incredible. They support each other.
Yeah.
Post, you know, once they come out after the 12 weeks, they're still supporting each other, and that's the whole purpose, is building the community so that the women feel as though they're not on their own. So I mean, there's so much that can be done here, that can be done anywhere. I mean, yesterday I was watching the news back home, and Queen Camilla is becoming a patron of domestic abuse and violence.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
And she's campaigning, she's doing a lot of active work to support in this space. I think her sole aim is to talk about it, is to get people talking about it.
Which is good.
So it's not, you know, taboo, and people don't want to, I don't want to deal with domestic violence.
I think with the UK, they definitely, it's become, you know, the police have certain powers as well now. There's certain things going on. I think the UA is definitely progressing as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And have changed things. I think that's really good. We also want you know, I'll let you ask this.
Yeah, just sort of the last question, I suppose, would be if you have any advice for a listener who might be, you know, seeking your guidance in terms of, I suppose, what's the first thing maybe that they could do if they think perhaps that they or someone that they know might be dealing with domestic abuse,
I would say just reach out to professionals. There are so many here. Reach out to the foundation. I can leave my information as well if people want to have a confidential
we'll share
chat.
your details anyway.
Just the first step is just making contact. And I think, and if you're worried about somebody, I would say trust your intuition. We so often dismiss our intuition. The alarm bells ring and we go, oh, don't worry about that. It's fine. Our rational brain takes over and it decides to make the decision for us that we don't need to get involved. Lead with your gut, your intuition. The alarm bell is there for a reason. Don't override it. And we often do in many scenarios, and then it comes back and we go, I knew I should have.
I suppose what's the worst that can happen anyway?
Exactly. What's the worst? If it turns out it's not, brilliant,
then
fantastic.
That's a good thing.
But we see it in cases all the time, child abuse cases where things have happened and teachers have said, oh, I thought something was wrong. There were bruises. There was an issue, but I thought, it was fine.
I think we kind of pick up on
signs.
We can tell when a client's going through something.
Yeah.
Obviously, with our job, they do kind of tell us quite quickly as well if there's something been going on. And you know, there's incidents of all sorts of things. But Saria, we obviously have loved having you on, and we're kind of proud sponsors of the Liberated Woman. We think it's fantastic. And obviously, if we have anyone that we want to recommend, we would recommend. If not you, then are also able to just assist women that need some help. So I think it's a fantastic program.
Thank you.
We will put your details on the podcast when it's out, so people can contact you. And I think we probably need to signpost people to you more
Yeah,
as well.
sure.
So I'll speak to the team.
No worries.
So that needs to happen. So we'll need to put like a section as well. So I
Yeah.
think that's really important, especially in this region. I think the UK is a lot more accessible. There's lots of places.
Yeah.
And they're quite good, like even midwives and health visitors. They're all sorts of them. They're all quite, GPs, they're straight away, we'll start asking those questions straight away, like, well, how did this happen?
Yes.
Yeah, and they're
of
quite,
course.
with safeguarding.
Mm.
That's really good. But I think the UAE definitely will get there.
Yeah.
And they're
Oh,
taking
for
steps
sure.
now as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
thank you so
thank
much
you.
for having me.
That was great. Thank you.